In order for us to use our new actor, we're going to need a way to create the scriptable object in our project. To do this, we're going to make a new utility class that'll help us out. Inside of our Battle System Editor folder, let's create a new C# script, and we're going to call this AssetUtil. Then let's open this up in MonoDevelop. Since this will be a utility class, we can remove MonoBehavior and also delete the start and update methods. In order for us to work with the asset folder inside of our project, we're going to need to import the Unity editor namespace. Now let's go ahead and create a new static method that will allow us to create scriptable objects. We'll start by making this public, static with a return type of void, and we're going to call it createScriptableObject. Now before we finish this method, we're going to make this a generic method. A generic method allows us to pass different types of classes into it and still perform the same actions. We're going to make the base assumption that whatever the generic class we pass in is always going to be a derivative of the scriptable object. To do this, we're going to add t as the type, and then once we close the parentheses, let's add where t : scriptable object. And now we can use this just like any other method we've used before. In fact, you're probably familiar with using generic methods since we use them whenever we call getComponent on a game object. Now let's go ahead and create our asset. In order to do this, we're going to create a variable called asset, and we'll set it equal. And on the scriptableObject class, we're going to call createInstance and pass in our reference of t. Now we're able to instantiate a scriptable object. Once we've done that though, we're going to want to save it to our project folder. Now let's create a new variable, and we're going to make a path to where we should save this file. We're going to reference the asset database, and on the asset database, we're going to call getAssetPath, and we're going to use the selections current active object. Now, since we'll be creating the scriptable object inside of a folder, the folder will be the active object, and we'll get a path to that folder. Next, we need to create a path and a name in order to save this correctly. So let's create a new variable called AssetPath and name, and set it equal to the asset database. But this time, we're going to call a new method, generateUniqueAssetPath. This will allow us to create a unique name, especially if another asset of a similar name exists. It'll just append a number to the end of it. This will make it easy so we don't have to worry about overriding any of the scriptable objects we create in the folder. Here, we'll pass in the path plus a /, the word new, and after our string, we're going to use the type of the class as the name. So simply call typeOf and pass in t. And finally, let's add the extension as a string, which will be .asset. And let's use a close parenthesis. Now we have the asset's path and name, so we can use it to save it back into the asset database. To do this, we're going to call asset database and then create asset. We'll pass in a reference to the asset instance, and then we'll pass in the asset path and name. Next, we're going to want to automatically select it once we create it. Let's reference the selection class and set the active object to our new asset. And finally, let's give focus to where our asset was created. Here, we'll reference the editor utility class and call the static method focus project window. The last thing we want to do is save the asset. Let's reference the asset database class and call the save asset static method. Now let's save our code and go back to our actor editor. We can now delete our debug log statement, and in its place, let's call the asset utilities createScriptableObject. And here we're going to pass in the actor as the generic class. Let's save this and go back into Unity. Now inside of our actor folder, if we right-click, go to the Create menu and select Actor, and now our new actor is inside of our asset folder and it's ready to be edited.